And I'm just checking the slide to make sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for logging on and attending this evening's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, there are just a few notes. Please let me know if there are any technical issues that I can try to resolve. You can send those to me in the chat. And you can also send any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A button. This program is made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Ashley Rooney. Ashley is the past president of the Lexington Field and Garden Club and a prolific author. And she is a great resource for gardening in the community, bringing numerous experts to the library over the past year. Ashley will be back on Thursday, February 11th at 7 p.m. to discuss pruning with Jim Harshbarger. Did I say that right? Harshbarger? Barger?
Barger, yeah.
Oh, Barger, sorry. So now, please welcome Ashley.
Hi there, everybody. And one of my experts is Guy Doran, and we've had him several times, and his programs are ever so popular because, as my husband says, he learns so much from him. Guy really gets down and dirty, if you want, as all good gardeners should, and explains how things work and what you can do. Guy is more than happy to take questions. I will field them. You can send them to me through, what's the screen? The Q&A screen, and we can interrupt him as he keeps going on and tells us where to buy all the seeds and plants. And let's get going. Guy, please take over.
If we can have the first slide. Okay, so Ashley asked me to talk about new things for this year. And I selected three companies: Johnny's Selected Seeds, Harris Seeds, and Burpee. I selected these. There's a lot of different seed companies, but I selected these three, and probably the foremost on my list is Johnny's. It's 100% employee owned. It's non-GMO, genetically modified seed. It's not genetically modified. They signed that pledge in 1999. And I find, having been in the business for a number of years, that they have sort of taken over for vegetables and flowers for New England that are bred, that do very well in New England, adapt to our conditions. Years and years ago, Harris Seed, who is out in New York, they were considered the ones that were the best for this area, even to the point where they had one retail store. This is Harris now. They had one retail store, and it was on the corner of Bow Street and Mass Ave. And that main reason for that was because this whole area was such a big market gardening area for New England. So they found it very profitable to have their store there, as well as out in Rochester, New York. And the third one is Burpee. Burpee is actually owned by a member of the George Ball Company, one of the Ball sons or grandsons, I guess now. And George Ball Company, seed company, is one of the biggest seed companies in the country and suppliers to growers, both through seeds and plant material. So I think these three companies have the best knowledge and do a lot of the introductions of new material. I've selected a few things from each company on this year's list of new material out of each one of them. If we can go to the first, this is spinach, Equinox spinach, and not only do I think this is good, but out of Johnny's, but Johnny's has probably one of the biggest list of greens, especially lettuce and lettuce mixes and sprouts. So I was just, I read the description of this particular spinach and it caught my eye, and spinach is so easy to grow. So I thought that would be good for the list. The next one is,
Guy,
yeah,
you can plant spinach pretty early too. People keep asking me, when can I start planting?
that's
So
right.
March?
That's a little early. I
Okay,
would say into April.
okay.
And I'd have to go back and check, but I think this particular one, one reason it caught my eye was that it was uh, more heat tolerant than some of the older varieties. It didn't bolt as fast.
Okay, so it'll go longer.
Yeah.
Now, another question here from one of the audience members. Do you have a suggestion for starting a small herb garden indoors from seed? And what are the easiest herbs to grow?
Why
Basil?
don't we save that for a little later?
Okay,
Because I've got something coming up on a little later.
okay, we'll get back to that one.
Yeah. The next one, this is a tomato, Abigail. And I'm going to reference back to when you had Russ Morash on. I was so pleased when Russ said that he was not a fan of heirloom tomatoes, that
Yes,
they're not disease resistant. They don't produce as much as a lot of your newer varieties that have been bred in the last 30 or 40 years. But this one actually is a makeover. It's been rebred. It is an heirloom, but it's been rebred. And in reading the description of it, I thought that it was very well worth trying, which I may very well do.
Ah,
This next one is quite interesting. You're going to get a kick out of the celery. And I have,
Lexington used to be the capital of celery.
well, not so much the capital, but let me tell you, I have not enjoyed celery as much as I did years and years ago, because what you see on the left is celery growing, and that would be like that in your garden, hopefully. But the one on the right that's being bleached.
Oh,
And I grew up with stories of celery being grown with celery boards before they developed the paper, that the farmers would, when the celery was mature, and they would have piles of these boards that were about 12, 14 inches wide. And they would pull the celery up and put the boards and pull the celery stalks in and keep the light out. That's what bleaching celery is. Some descriptions say blanching, but that's not right. It's bleaching. And then in later years, there was a company, I believe, down in Norwood or Walpole, the Bird Company, that developed a paper that was like a brown craft paper that had a tar infused in it in the middle, and so that it held up in the wet and they could reuse it from year to year. And they developed some equipment on the back of tractors, and they could pull the celery up and put the paper up next to it, and they had these big wire wickets that held the paper up where. And bleached celery is so tender and sweet. You don't get, maybe the hearts of celery now, it comes close to it, but not like the old celery. And sometime, if you're going to have another farming talk on, get the Boozer boys, Dennis and Fran and Angelo and those guys that come in. The one that owns the liquor store, Dan, get them to come in, because the Boozer families that were in Lexington were great celery growers, and get them to talk about it.
huh, interesting.
So that caught my eye. So let's go to the next one. Again, we're still on Johnny's. This is a wonderful red lettuce called Marciano. And again, I don't think anybody has a list of lettuces and greens like Johnny does. And you'd be amazed at the different types, the different sizes and styles of lettuce that they have, and well worth looking into. And this is also a good time. I've got a big note on the top of my notes here to point out to people that when you buy seeds, my recommendation is stick with the packets that the companies offer you. That's for the average garden anywhere around here. A packet of any kind of seed is enough for the season, unless you're really into something special, that you're going to just grow a lot of beans or a lot of lettuce or whatever. You'll find that a packet, when you look at the seed catalogs and you look at an ounce, a packet might be $3.95 or $5.50, and an ounce might only be about $7.50. And you go, well, gee, I'll get an ounce because $7.50, that isn't much. Trust me, you don't need an ounce of.
That's a lot of seed.
That's a lot of seed. And I can remember the salesman, the Harris seed salesman, when he'd come around back when Russ Morash and Jim Crockett started the Victory Garden, the seed companies got the biggest kick out of the orders that came in from people. Let's say a doctor in Newton would send in an order for $1,200 worth of seed. There'd be a pound of this and a half a pound of that. And they couldn't get over it. They were very thankful for it, but trust me, a packet of seed on almost everything is all you need.
Yep.
So let's go to the last one for Johnny's is this. This is a butternut called Butter Baby. And in the last few years, there's been several varieties of these small butternuts that have been developed. And I find that Butter Baby has been the best one for flavor and texture. And especially, they're developed for you to cut them in half, clean out the seed cavity, and turn them upside down in a baking sheet and with some water and bake them. Anybody that's still cutting up and boiling their butternut squash is really out of date. You've got to bake them. It is so much better.
Oh, yes.
So this one here is really the one to try, and I think you'll like it.
There's
nice too.
There's a question that came in the Q&A, actually.
Oh, look, it popped up. I just checked. Can you use a package of seeds for more than 1 year? I have.
If you keep them cool and dry, don't leave them open on the shelf in the garage, or in a shed that's can get damp. Close the packets up, put them into a plastic container, and keep them out of the sun and where it's cool and dry, and almost everything will be fine the next year if you follow those simple rules. Now, a few things like lettuce do lose maybe a little more of the germination percentage than most things. So a lot of growers will buy fresh lettuce seed every year, but I've used older lettuce seed after a year, and if you have 98% on the packet when you buy it new, and it comes out to be 87%, well worth keeping it in at least for a year.
Yep.
So the answer is yes. Cool and dry, out of the sun, and it's fine. Also, actually, not so much on vegetables, but if you do flowers, vegetables too. One thing is you want good companies, and that's another thing about these three companies, especially Johnny's, the information in their catalog, everything you want to know about beets or carrots or lettuce, anything you want to know basically is in that catalog. It will tell you. And if it doesn't, they have a tremendous video library that you can go to. Johnny's is really quite a company.
Oh, that's interesting.
Getting back to
video library.
These seed packets when you get them, and the catalogs, some seeds require light to germinate. So you want to check that instead of, typically you make a, let's say, make a little furrow and you tap your seeds in and cover them over with maybe an eighth or a quarter inch of soil. But some things don't want to be covered very much, and some things don't want to be covered at all. And especially there are flower seeds like that. And perennial seeds, you want to check. There are perennial seeds that you have to freeze them for a period of time. They have to go through that freezing period for them to germinate properly. So you want to check that. Keep an eye on that.
Read the directions. We have another question, Guy. I've given up on squash because I always get squash vine borers. Is there a way to prevent them?
Yeah, you can, there is a dust that you can get and put it on the vines. I've never really ever been bothered by it. I feel that's too bad if they're constantly bothered by it. You might, I don't have an answer offhand, but I'm sure there's an organic treatment for them if you check with like New England nurseries and see what they recommend, if they have an organic material that might work.
Okay.
That I also have a note here, that is something that I want to bring up. I think from my feeling, and I'm sure there's greenhouse places and growers that aren't going to be too happy with this, but any of the squashes and cukes, basically the vine crops, I would recommend starting them from seed outside. I don't think, the things, they come up and get pretty leggy and soft if you start them inside. I think you'll find you have plenty of time in late May and early June to start any of the squash and cucumbers outside in the ground. It might be a little cheaper, and you'll be guaranteed, I think, of the varieties that you get. Sometimes there's mix-ups on those things, and I tend to like to seed them myself in the yard, but that's my opinion.
It's a good opinion.
Now, if we go to the next one,
Okay.
we're jumping into Harris seed now.
That's a beautiful cauliflower.
This is a cauliflower, but what I really liked about it, and it's what it's called, twister. And if you've ever really grown cauliflowers, the best way to grow good white cauliflower, any of the colors actually, but especially the white, is when the head is pretty much developed. You have these tremendously big leaves, tall leaves and big plants, but you're supposed to pull them in, and they did this, they do this in the field. You pull them in and you actually tie these big leaves up, and you're doing the same thing you did to the celery. You're bleaching it, and you're getting a nice white tender cauliflower. But they've bred this one called Twister, and the inner leaves actually grow in over the head of the cauliflower and bleach it as it's growing. So I thought this was a tremendous improvement on cauliflower.
Yeah, interesting.
Let's see, let's go to the next. Pak choy, become very, very popular in Lexington. I went out in Carlisle, and when I had extra fresh or extra seedlings, I would bring them down and give them to Carla for the food pantry every Saturday. And it was the first thing that would disappear. She said that so many people at the food pantry would just grab it. They loved it. And it's an easy vegetable to grow. So this one is called, I didn't write the name down, but it's called rachu. It must have some meaning to somebody, but it's pak choy, and it's a new variety out of Harris seed. So I think this is well worth trying. And if we can go to the next, this is a new tomato from Harris, red snapper. And what caught my eye, it was a good sized tomato. The description of the flavor and texture was excellent. It doesn't look like it has a deep core, which is good. But I also, what caught my eye was that it was more heat tolerant. It was bred to set fruit at higher temperatures than a lot of the common hybrids do. And last summer, that heat wave we had,
Yeah.
if I went out in the middle of August, I could tell you when we had hot weather, because I had great set of fruit up so far, and then there wasn't any tomatoes, but you could see where the flowers had been, and then they started setting again. And tomatoes in high heat and humidity abort a lot of their fruit. And this one is bred to take the higher temperatures. So that's what caught my eye on this variety.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that.
Oh, ask Peter, he knows. All right, let's go to the next one. Now this is burpee, and this is a beet called mono. And what I like about it, and I had bought a similar type beet from Johnny for a couple of years called Moneta, and those two varieties are only have one seed, one embryo in each seed, whereas just about all the other beets have several embryos. So if you space these out how you like them in the little furrow that you make, and you get good germination, you won't have to do any thinning. So if you have grown beets, a lot of times you tap out what you think is a rather thin row, but you get all these beets that come up, and if you don't thin them out, then they don't grow quite as well, and you don't get quite as nice crop of beets. So this is a great improvement. Mono from Burpee and Moneta from Johnny's.
I have a question for you, and I'm going to save a question. Steve asks, are there any suggestions for powdery mildew? And I don't know where you get powdery mildew.
Does he have anything in particular that he gets it?
Steve, can you answer that?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was on squashes, pumpkins, cucumbers.
Okay.
Might take him a second to type or.
There's another question that came in. How do you kill the pests that infest bok choy?
It's usually a beetle, and I've never had that big a problem with it. I tend to kind of share.
Okay. Share with the bugs and pick them off?
Yeah. Yes.
Steve's powdery mildew comes with tomatoes and squash.
I'm surprised on the tomatoes. The squash, it generally isn't too big a problem. Some of it comes naturally with night. Powdery mildew comes when there's the surface of the plant is a certain temperature, mostly at night, and moisture on there. There are varieties that will be listed as not being bothered by powdery mildew and different things like that. I would look at your catalogs and see ones that are resistant to it. Again, I'll get to powdery mildew on something else very shortly.
Okay. And Lysandra, I'm going to save your question about blueberries and raspberries to a bit later, because he's going to talk about that too.
Yep.
So nag me if I forget you. Okay. And let's continue here.
Yep. Next. Corn. Not something I typically, unless you have a very big garden,
Yeah.
I don't generally recommend people. I think for the time, the space involved, and it's not worth it. It's so much easy to just go to Wilson's or Verrill's or someplace like that and buy a dozen ears of corn, and it's fresh every day. Um, but this particular one came out a few years ago from Burpee. It's called On Deck, and they developed it to, if you've got like an 18-inch, 24-inch pot, you grow it in the pot on your deck, and it works. I grew it in Carlisle for those folks out there, and it was excellent. So it's a fun thing to do, and if you have kids, they'll see how it grows.
Yeah, they would like that. That would be fun.
There's someone that's raised their hand. So do you want me to?
Devastating tomato leaves. I'm growing on. Okay, let's back to the powdery mildew. Oh, well, there's a raise hand one too.
Yeah, there's just two people that have raised their hands. Do you want me to wait or do it now, or wait till?
Oh, go ahead. I don't see any question for them. I have two questions here that I'm kind of holding.
It'll be that I enable them to talk.
Okay,
so
go ahead. Why don't we do it now?
So Elizabeth, I'm gonna enable you to ask a question. I'm just looking for you in the list. Oh, okay, there. Go ahead, Elizabeth. You just have to unmute yourself.
Elizabeth?
All right. I'll go back to disabling.
Okay.
And then Marita had a question. Marita, if you want to ask your question, you just have to unmute.
Or maybe they. Okay.
Are you calling on me? I didn't write a question, but now that you call on me, I had a little trouble getting in, but then I realized that you changed the passcode was wrong. But I read an article, and I was over visiting the Bedford Community Gardens, and they had solitary bees nests. And I was wondering if you're aware of those and if you recommend them.
I do. In fact, we put up the nest box this summer and had a couple of dozen use it, and it was great to watch them. Maybe I totally believe in it. Maybe this is a good time to do the plug for
No.
upcoming.
Yeah.
This book just came out, and I read it, finished it yesterday. It's called Nature's Best Hope. I highly recommend it for anybody interested in saving our planet and the human species. And the author, Douglas Talame, is speaking by Zoom from the library when?
The 28th, I believe.
I think it is. So the 28th of January.
At 7 p.m. You have to ask for a reservation to get in, and you can go ahead and do it now.
But this,
Let me just to clarify, you just sign up on our on the library website. There's a registration there.
Yeah.
that's a 10 days, 2 weeks, a couple of weeks away. If you can get a hold of this book, we bought it in the Concord Bookshop. It's well worth to read prior to him, listening to him. And it covers, that's one of the subjects that it covers. You'll be amazed at the information that's in this book.
Guy?
Yeah.
The guy who was asking, Steve, who was asking about the powdery mildew, says it's devastating to tomato leaves. I'm growing on Martha's vineyard. And there would be, I could see that there'd be more problems with mildew out there.
Yeah. I don't have an answer other than there are fungicides to use. I don't have one to recommend, but I'm sure that there's fungicides to cover the powdery mildew.
Again, I would go to New England Nursery or Mahoney's and ask them. They have all sorts of solutions sort of hidden away.
Well, they do. Maybe first check your catalogs and look for varieties that might be resistant. That's where I'd start.
Mm. Good point.
Okay.
Okay, back to corn. I'm going to save this question on raspberries and blueberries till we get there.
Yep. Where are we going? Let's go next, Matt. Basil.
Oh, it's a herb question. Yes.
Powdery mildew has become that it was never a problem. And then all of a sudden, a strain of powdery mildew has moved into the area and devastated a lot of the basil crops all across New England. And this is from Johnny's. It's called Prospera, and it's mildew resistant. I grew, I don't know if I had this one or one similar to it last year, and I've never had a crop of basil like I did last year. It just went on and on and on. And if you look in their catalog, they have 3 types of this particular basil for 3 different applications, I think. I don't quite remember why the 3, but if you go online and look on Johnny's and look up this Prospera basil, you'll see it, and it will solve a lot of problems that people have been having for the last few years. It really is good. So
Now, we had a question about herb gardens and growing herb seeds inside and what you recommended for herbs.
well, your herbs that we use on a regular basis from seed would be the basil, curly or French parsley, and Italian parsley, which you would start inside. The parsleys, you probably could start all of them outside in early May.
Yeah.
The basil, not the basil or the dill, but the parsleys you could.
Yeah.
A lot of the other herbs that we use, like tarragon, thymes, oregano, we buy by plants. But one thing that I had in my notes was Burpee has a program in their catalog called Mix and Match. And you can buy tomatoes, peppers, and quite a few herbs from them. Excuse me. Make up your order, and you can have one of this and one of that if you want.
Oh, that's good.
And so that's an opportunity on some things that you don't want to start from seed. But the basil comes up outside very well. Dill, we usually get at least 2 crops. I seed it, and what comes up and goes to seed, I drop those seeds right back down, and they're coming up by the time we need them again. So, you know, some of it is, but again, some of it is you have to buy plants because they're from cuttings or divisions.
If you're going to grow mint, I would grow it in a pot because it's very invasive. And it'll take over lots of spaces that you don't want it to take. Be one other thing I'd recommend. And talking to people, most people have a hard time growing cilantro around here. It doesn't seem to work.
Really?
Yeah, do you grow it?
I have.
Yeah, I found mine just sort of disappears very quickly. It grows and then that's it. And other people said the same thing. So maybe I shouldn't recommend, but try cilantro, see if it works, because
Yeah.
more and more foods use it. Okay. Sylvia Mallory asked, what type?
Johnny Seed, go to Johnny Seed catalog and see if they have any tips or recommendations on it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. One more tomato question. What types of tomatoes do you recommend for growing in pots on a deck? Is it advisable to stick with a determinate type? Determinate.
Determinate, yes, you can. That's a bush type tomato. Grow it in, well, I'm gonna say, if you have a pot or a tub, ideally 4 to 5 gallon volume to give enough soil and root space and weight in the pot so that you can use a cage. So you'd grow a determinate variety in the pot in a cage, and it will work fine. You can grow an indeterminate, same amount of soil, a decent sized pot, and use a 6 to 8 foot stake. It works. And again, going back to Johnny's and their video library, I intentionally looked at their video on pruning indeterminate tomatoes.
Oh,
I get Elaine and I definitely will not tell you the person's name, but we gave some tomatoes in pots to a couple of people to grow on their front steps last year, and gee, one pruned every growing point the tomato had off.
oh dear. You didn't have the tomatoes, huh?
Fortunately, there was a shoot that came out the bottom that I got them to train out. You'll never get the name out of me.
How we learn. Oh, and this woman also wanted to know, did you recommend a variety? Oh, and this woman would like to know, what's a determinate tomato?
Okay, indeterminate is what we probably know most would have grown up with for years. And there's a central stem that grows and it just keeps growing and sets fruit as it goes up. Indeterminate is a variety that's bred to have several main stems and produce tomatoes on all these, but they only grow so tall, usually grown either in a cage or on the ground. And a lot of commercial growers for processing, like sauces and ketchup and things like that, grow those so that they can basically pick a lot of tomatoes all at one time, because there's ways of getting several hands of fruit on one stem to mature and ripen at one time. So that's a determinate that only grows so much and produces tomatoes on several stems. The indeterminate, when I talk about pruning indeterminate, at almost every node axis of a leaf in the main stem, you'll get this new shoot that comes out. And basically, you don't want those to come out. You break them off when they're a couple of inches long. But if you watch the video, you'll learn a lot. As far as varieties, I grew up with the first hybrids. Morton hybrid was put out by Harris Seed in the 50s, and I think Burpee's Big Boy was about the same time. And then Harris made it disease resistant and called it Jetstar, and along the same breeding program, they came up with one a little bigger called Supersonic. And the Supersonic, Jetstar, and Big Boy have been the mainstay for home gardens for years in this area. There's a lot of new varieties. Again, going back before those hybrids, I don't think it's worth it. So you get a tomato that's kind of purpley or has bumps on it. That doesn't mean anything to me. I want a nice fruit with a not much of a core in it, and a good ratio of juice and meat inside, with good flavor. That's what, and a good yield. You know, a lot of the heirlooms don't yield as much as a lot of your newer ones. So
But they certainly don't. They certainly don't. We ought to keep going. We're gonna run. Oh, wait a minute. Do you recommend a nice cherry tomato variety? I've been growing sun golds. Those are
Oh my
nice
God.
tomatoes.
there is so many plums, cherries, million. They're all great. It's just finding one that you like the flavor of.
Yep.
There's an old one that I like that you can't find anymore, but the yield and production on cherry tomatoes now it's phenomenal. You can't eat them all.
You know what I discovered? You can wash them and bag them and freeze them and then pull them out and do whatever you want with them in the winter.
There you go. Let's jump along and see what
Keep
else.
Um,
Okay, this is just to point out, Johnny's in a tremendous amount of lettuce mixes and sprout mixes, well worth looking at, but we touched on that earlier.
Yeah.
Next. Multi-pick yellow squash, old favorite, one of the best varieties out there. Several companies have it, so multi-pick yellow squash. Next. And this is just to talk about
Oh,
growing in
tomatoes.
So why don't we skip to the next batch of, okay, Norse Farms,
Okay, let me get back to her question.
South Deerfield, Mass. Get a catalog or go online. I'm sure everything is online. Tremendous source for strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, as well as other things, but those are the main crops. And
And it's gorgeous. Lysandra asks, my 18-month-old and almost 5-year-olds love blueberries and raspberries. Do you think this is feasible to try and not too difficult since we're dealing with 2 small kids? Any advice would be appreciated. We even considered freezing blueberries,
Yep.
but did not try. I will say, when I bought this house, I had a great big blueberry bush out there and I had little kids. We loved it. We all picked the blueberries. I froze them for years. The one bush gave me 40 pints for a long time. If you have sun and some water, I would definitely recommend it.
I know that, you know, Norse has a lot of different varieties of blueberries, but they have a blueberry package. I think that it's 3 varieties, 2 of each. So you'd get 6 plants. Blueberries, to my knowledge, all the high bush blueberries need to cross pollinate. So you'd at least have to buy a couple of varieties. But
Mhm.
if you get the blueberry package, which only 6 plants, that's designed for the homeowner, and you'll find everything you need to know from Norse. Great people. Tim North, great
With
guy.
blueberries, you get beautiful foliage in this winter, in the fall. They're just gorgeous.
And if you don't want to pick them, leave them for the birds.
Yeah.
We won't have to leave them very long.
No, you won't. Oh, we're gonna have another question here.
Strawberries, same thing. The nice thing about strawberries now, day neutral strawberries.
Mm.
Tim Norse has varieties out there. Read all the descriptions. Strawberries were always June bearers. There was one ever bearer that really only had fruit in the spring and towards the fall. Now day neutral ones flower and produce fruit all summer long, and they're great.
Yep.
So look into it. And raspberries, it works. You know, if you got young kids, don't forget they got thorns.
Yeah, the blueberries are easier.
Blueberries and strawberries are great.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next.
Oh, one more question. She asked, should we wash the blueberries before freezing and dry? Yes, you wash the fruit before you freeze them.
No,
No, I
no.
always do.
You haven't sprayed anything on them. You pick them, put them dry on a cookie sheet, put them in the freezer, freeze them, then pour them into a bag and they're loose. And when you only need a cup for those blueberry muffins, you just pour them out of the bag. You freeze them dry.
Okay.
If you wash them, you got to dry them off before you freeze them, so they don't stick together. This is a picture of Norse Farms out in South Deerfield.
Out
So,
near where Matt grew up.
yes, right.
No, it was not where I grew up, but where I went to
No.
college.
Yeah, okay.
So next, Ashley wanted me to talk about flowers, and I'll start off by saying that if you look at the catalogs, those 3 catalogs, as well as many others, a lot of varieties kind of overlap. There isn't, in a way, there isn't a lot of new introductions as far as a lot of common flowers like marigolds and salvia and stuff like that. Where you have the new introductions are in patented plants, and the biggest supplier and developer is Proven Winners. The Proven Winner Corporation, a group of growers. It took me 20 minutes to go down through their list of plants this afternoon. I couldn't believe how big it was. And I was a buyer from day one when things like Scavola and Brachycomb and things like that came out, before they were even called Proven Winners. And now it's phenomenal. So, and that's not typically something you can buy. You buy them already grown. But Ashley mentioned dahlias, and I do know that the popularity of dahlias has grown tremendously. And I have bought Dahlia tubers from several sources, and I'd have to say that the best one that I've ever found was Swan Island. Just everything about the company and the quality of the product. But a couple of things I want to point out. If we go to the next picture, well, this is one of their new introductions this year, is Oregon Sunset. It's probably $35. And don't be surprised if the tuber comes, it's about the size of a medium-sized clementine. Might be a little bigger, might be a little smaller. It's not gonna have any roots on it, not gonna be growing. That's what you're gonna get. And when you order dahlias, tubers from Dahlia companies, that's what you get. But let me tell you that the Swan Island quality is excellent. And you know, just learn how to start them in your house, and along in early May, get them started inside where it's warm. And the minute they start to sprout, then if the weather is conducive outside, then plant them out, and you'll have great luck. Let's go to the next one. This is called Barefoot. Again, $35. But if we go to the next slide, the one on the left is called Mount Hood, probably $35. The one on the right is Bride to Be, and that's probably $5.95. So these new introductions, yes, they start out $30, $35, $40. A couple of years later, they might be 25, and a couple of years later, they might be 15. And a couple of years later, they're going to be whatever the bottom rung of the ladder is, $5.95, $6.95. So you'll find that out of the catalog, if they have 150 varieties, probably 50 of them, 100 of them are $6.95. So don't be scared. Just go online and look at what they have and the different types. I don't remember the size on the one on the left here, Mount Hood, but it might be what they call a dinner plate dahlia. Might be 8-10 inches across. It might be 3 or 4 inches. I don't remember, but they're all beautiful. So that's what you want to check out, is the variety and the styles and the heights that you want to grow.
Yeah, the height is important with dahlias because they can get very tall.
Yep. So
Thank you for adding dahlias. I see one more question here. If you start them inside, do you need special lights? Peter?
no, just a good bright sunny window, right?
Yes, you could do a bright sunny window. Peter and I start the dahlias that we usually sell at the Garden Club plant sale inside in March.
Mid-March.
And you have lights and they have heat. And eventually when it gets warm enough, we get them into a greenhouse. Okay. Oh, this may be tricky. Which is the variety or name a white alyssum that grows quickly and really trails?
White alyssum?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
I know that there, in the proven winner line, excuse me, there is one or two alyssums that are very vigorous that typically are used in mixed containers. The old white alyssum, I don't know, it's been so long. Can't tell you. Got to go to the catalog.
we gotta go to the catalog. I didn't realize you could buy proven winners from a catalog. I thought you always had. to buy
No,
from
no,
a
no, I'm looking at white alyssum from seed.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't even see it in the Johnny's catalog, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Sorry, Kate, we can try to look it up and get back to you if you want. But offhand's not ringing big bells here. But there's so many flowers out there.
If it's something you want white to hang, there are things that are a little more rugged and longer lasting than white alyssum. I mean, there's white scabolas, there's a lot of white things, if you want them to really hang.
Kate says, that's okay, thank you. So white scabola is a very nice, it's a very pretty one. And I think that's the end of the questions. And Guy, you were fantastic. One more time, we all learned so much from you. Even to not washing my blueberries anymore, I could see. So I thank you very much. And as Matt pointed out, next week we will, in February, we will be doing pruning. I finally found this wonderful guy. He demonstrated all over Churchill Redeemer how good his pruning was and how we could do it. We learned a good deal with him, and he's going to show us a lot on hydrangeas, I noticed as he showed it to me. So everybody stay healthy. We look forward to seeing you in February. And soon we'll all be planting because I can see the sun getting warmer. And I'm getting all sorts of thank yous, Guy, from the panelists. So again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Guy and Ashley.
You're welcome.